This is the Better Software Faster podcast, where we deep dive into the intersection of tech and business to demystify, unravel, and explore concepts that you can apply to your own organization. From pipelines to processes, forecasting to fine-tuning, best practices to balance sheets, we draw on all of our customer-facing experience to bring you the best high-level talking points. Hello, and welcome to the Better Software Faster podcast. I'm your host, Adam Godwin. Today, we're joined back again with Miro and Amos. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. We had a nice little interim episode with Joe talking about the trials and tribulations of technical leadership, and now we're back in the room with our technical leaders. So we're going to move back to the subject of AI in the business world. We talked a little bit about defining AI and what a good strategy is for implementation. Once it's in there, we need to work out what we're going to do with it, and that's the subject of today's podcast. So we're going to talk about use cases and how to kind of hone and fine tune your agents. On the last episode, we talked a bit about vertical agents. Just to give us a refresher, could you give us a working definition of what a vertical agent is in the AI space?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a go. I think the advent of large language models, or LLMs as we'll refer to them from now on, has created or spawned a whole new level of abstraction in terms of getting software to speak directly with end users. And whether it's done through audio, whether it's done through text, or whether it's done through prompt, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, doesn't really matter. What's come out of that is an entire series and landscape of agents that are now working with very specific use cases and very specific industries. These industries are what we call vertical agents. And these vertical agents, for instance, might be for end user support. They might be for personal assistance. They might be for learning. They could be for any number of individual subjects, but that's their vertical specialism, right? And that's what it's all about.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we're talking about different specialisms, different kind of ways that you would apply it, different use cases. And as you said, like they are agents, they're used for different things. So what kind of use cases are fairly standard, would you say? Maybe like early adoptees?
I'll have a stab at this. I think one thing that kind of came out quite early on in the curve for AI agents was the use case for customer service, right? You know, we've all seen the chatbot on the website. You know, offering help in an AI type of text-based fashion. Right, I think what we're going to see very shortly with the publishing of the OpenAI real-time API is actually taking this to voice-based interaction as well. Right, there have been players in the market doing voice-based AI agents, but I think now the technology is a lot easier to start building with the real-time API that's currently in public availability, right? So you know, we might see a reduction in call centers and an increase in AI-based call centers that actually work, right? Because that's the other thing. You know, we've had the AI or voice recognition based telephone conversations, which are always a huge pain. Right, but maybe with the advent of AI and the new capabilities in this space, we'll actually start to have some telephone conversations with an AI agent that actually work as we expect them to. Right.
Completely agree, and I think I don't know about you, but anytime I've used a chatbot for the last 5 years, knowing how a lot of them are built, the first thing I do is ask, "Can I speak to a human, please?" Right. Because these chatbots really are there supposed to give you the first line of defense. But the truth is, for most, any kind of sophisticated question, they genuinely can't give you any form of nuance because that's not how they're designed to work. They've got a data set behind them. And if they can't understand what you're saying, they can only use search terms to find out what they think might be close to what you need. And 99 times out of 100, for me anyway, that's never worked. This is the whole problem with the chatbot function, and it's exactly the same for the telephony-based one. But if you're replacing that with something that's backed by a large language model that understands the context of speech, now all of a sudden you've got a complete substruct that understands what you're saying. So if it understands what you're saying, it can now apply the data that it has in your database, understanding the concept of what you're looking for. That all of a sudden makes it 100 times more efficient and 100 times more valuable. So chatbots and voice recognition telephony systems are about to get a huge makeover, right? And people will see all of a sudden that they start to become very useful and start to become very valuable. And that's a great example of a vertical agent that will start to add significant value very, very quickly.
What's really interesting about what you said, Amos, is the fact that you try and circumvent the chatbot to get to an agent right away, because I do exactly the same, right? So is there a new gold standard in AI-backed chatbots where the chatbot actually does things better and faster than the human that you might get to, right? So it's the new gold standard that you try and avoid the human and get to the AI chatbot, because you know that this will solve your issues much faster.
Or it's kind of like a new Turing test for chatbots, to the extent that you might go to speak to the human, it'll put you with the AI and you won't know the difference, right?
Yeah.
So you'll actually do with something that is equally as good, whether it's a human or an AI. And as you say, it may even be better with an AI. And a lot of that is based upon two things: latency and its conversational skills, right? And of course, the difference here as well is that you're then going to be able to spring up many, many, many hundreds or thousands of real-time threads for those conversations, for those support conversations for those customers simultaneously. So it's going to be having very high level, very contextual, very high data quality value conversations simultaneously. Now, if you're unlucky enough to have lots of support requests, but again, maybe have a large customer base like a telephony company, for example, the ones that we usually struggle to interact with, this is going to be a huge, huge advantage to them in order to solve these types of problems. And ultimately, I think it'll also save them a lot of money, as well as having happier customers.
Makes sense. And I think, just thinking out loud is one of the things here that is kind of still driving us towards humans in customer service, as end users in this use case. For example, the fact that an AI agent is not going to give you a discount, right? An AI agent is not going to handle your complaint, right? So it's actually the thing that we're looking for here, empowering the AI agents, giving them the power to give a discount or give a refund if they feel that's the right thing to do for this customer, right?
Ultimately, that's a really interesting sophistication that you mentioned there, because there's two things I would say about that. The first is that for this agent to be ultimately useful, it has to handle all edge cases, right? So there are definitely edge cases where discounts may be applicable, or where complaints may be applicable, or an end round process needs to be pushed further up the line for someone else to deal with. So for it to be ultimately valuable, it has to do all of those things. But if I can give you a parallel in the airline industry, at the moment in the airline industry, over the last 3 years, you may have noticed that every time you deal with them now, if you have the app belong to your favorite airline, whatever it might be, all of your transactional relationship goes through that app. So if you're unlucky enough to have a flight cancelled on you, the best you can hope for is a push notification. There is nobody to ring. There is nobody to call. There is no customer support for that. All right. So they're now pushing you down through a process where they're taking all of these people away from the phone lines, so they don't have to take phone calls from unhappy customers. And because they've all done it, your only choice is to go back through the app and hopefully have some information to book another flight. So what I would say is that I could easily see organizations that take what you described as, offers or discounts, and then decide whether they ever want to do them again. Because if they don't, you've got no way to penetrate the organization to make that happen. So they can be price sensitive themselves and either manage it themselves, or they can just draw a line under it, and computer will literally say no, and you'll never have an opportunity to do it. So there's a certain amount of market competitiveness in this and price sensitivity in it. But if you look at what the airlines have done for massive volume scale connectivity with their customers, they've gone the very draconian route and stopped you ringing you got no way of ringing out, venting your frustrations if the flight's cancelled, or even if you want to change it that way. It's all done online now, and it is what it is. You have no choice.
Yeah, what you said about the airline industry and flight cancellations, that's a great use case for a vertical AI agent, right? Our AI agent will call you, text you, WhatsApp you, send you the push notification, do anything it can to speak with you and handle this for you in as personal fashion as it can, right? Because we're not bound by the number of people we have in our call center to handle this. We can handle this for the 500 people or 300 people, whatever, simultaneously, right? So I think there's a real use case there, which is interesting enough. Probably something that organizations are building, right?
But you're exactly right. So now you're going from a situation where every time you get a push notification where you've got a cancelled flight, you're really, really hacked off, to something that could be a lot more proactive and say, okay, here are your options. Would you like to speak to somebody about it? All right. Bingo. Bang. Done. But the other thing is they could be more proactive, because in most cases they know that it's coming or that it's potentially happening. And all they're really doing is telling you that it's happened at the end of the process. Whereas that extra half an hour or 45 minutes where it's doubtful, that could easily be a conversation with an AI saying, this might happen. If it does happen, what would you like to do? Right? Here are the potential options. Bang. And it changes the expectation. If you get somebody giving you bad news but telling you what the options are, it's not as bad as saying, hey, tough, this has happened, deal with it. Right? So again, I completely agree with you. You could blend those two things together now and make it a really seamless and usable function. And all you're talking about is processor time and bandwidth. That's it. And that's the cheapest part of any implementation from an infrastructure point of view now. If you've got the AI piece doing all the calculations and hooked up to a pricing engine and an availability engine at the back end. Excuse me.
Well, some really interesting insights there, especially with the kind of the directionality of moving from sort of a standard knowledge-based article pumping out chatbot to speaking to a human, to then having sort of an AI agent presenting you. The other part of that as well is the latency of it, and this is something we've probably all experienced, right? I personally hate having to speak to a chatbot where all it's really doing is just looking for keywords and then giving you knowledge-based articles that have nothing to do with the problem that you've presented. Then you get put through to a human agent, time zone specific, and you suddenly have a whole new problem, which is that they're dealing with 8-9 concurrent conversations at the same time. They have to read your message, then they have to type out a response, which you then have to wait for. Then you see that they're typing, and the whole thing takes ages. I think I had one the other day that was about a 2-hour conversation over what ended up being a fairly simple kind of functionality request. I can definitely see sort of where you'd want the AI agents to play that role at the very top of the funnel. So you're distilling it down just to kind of a nice tight core that your humans can deal with. So let's talk a little bit about how you would evolve. Oh, sorry, Mo.
On that, Adam, I think the kicker is that when you do speak with a human, they're still following a script, right? You're not going to get to speak with a chat bot or chat-based human that can actually bend the rules and fix your issue to keep you as a happy customer, right? They more often than not tend to be the level 1 people who just follow a script, right? So that's something the AI agent can do and more, right? So yeah, it doesn't get much better with the point where you just bypass your AI agent, get to speak with a human.
I would go even further and say that we go back to our airline analogy. Not all airline travelers are the same. So if I've pushed you a link in the app that says, would you like to speak to the avatar, and you click on that link, by clicking on that link, the avatar already knows who you are and where you are in the hierarchy of the airline. So if I happen to be a platinum member, that avatar or that AI will have more authority to help me and support me than someone else might have, right? So that again could be a really, really valuable thing. So you're not having to go through layers. It's so Mr. Yusuf, I realize, you've flown this 200 times. Thank you so much. We're so sorry for this, and let me support you. So they're becoming much more concierge-like rather than just trying to take binary questions and give binary answers. And that's where the customer support piece comes in. And I think the other bit, Adam, that I would say, going back to the whole conversation about scripting, etc., that's assuming that the individual who you're speaking to has your language as their first language, right? Which is also a massive problem lots of times. It's hard enough doing it when you're speaking to someone over the phone, but it's actually often worse if you're writing, because some people, to keep costs down, they'll outsource this work to all different parts all over the world, and where English isn't necessarily the first language for UK customers, and that also causes frustration, mixed messages, lack of communication, loss in translation, all these kinds of things, which actually slow the process down. And even if you get to the end, you're not necessarily happy about it,
There's a great example there, Amos. The Finnish flag carrier Finnair, which you'll be familiar with, recently outsourced their call center and chat customer service operations, not to an AI agent, but to a bunch of people in Bulgaria, right? And to be able to serve Finnish customers, which still make a substantial portion of their customers, they implemented a transparent translation layer in the chat, right? So somebody writing in Bulgarian or whatever gets their message across in Finnish and vice versa, right? The issue there is that when these people don't have a shared language, a common language, the translations have issues, right? The translations have problems. They might be talking about a luggage where the translation is a box, right? Or things like this. And I've got some personal experiences of those going either badly wrong or hilariously wrong, where you try and solve an issue with an airline, right? And they talk to you, they talk complete gibberish to you in their chat, right? So there are true real issues with the translation piece as things stand already, and I think being able to use a large language model that has better translation capabilities than you might get off the shelf from a different solution might actually make this a lot better for your customers as well.
Yeah, even if you're just implementing that layer without going the whole hog and implementing the vertical agent, that translation piece would be valuable in and of itself, right? What could possibly go wrong? So yeah, it sounds a nightmare, quite frankly.
I think talking about adding things like translation layers brings us nicely onto our next subject here. So we're talking about having these virtual agents, and we've stayed on customer service. We're going to move away from it in a minute, but I wanted to ask, how would you improve this? Because it's fairly obvious when you have a staff member, if they're reading from a script, you can improve the script, you can improve the quality of their training, you can hire people with better communication skills. None of those things apply to a vertical agent. So how would you kind of hone your virtual agents? How would you fine tune them?
Well, I think a lot of those things do actually apply to the vertical agent as well, right? You will need to fine tune the vertical agent, not necessarily fine tune as an LLM, which in itself is a very valid way of getting the LLM to work in the way you want it to work. But it's an iterative process, right? You need to set up safeguards. You need to set up guidelines. You need to set up the tone that you want your vertical AI agents to use, and then obviously try and figure out what are all the edge cases that you'll want the vertical agent to solve, right? And when there are cases that you just want to get to a human, how quickly can you identify those cases from your queue of conversations, right? And then move them along to humans. But yeah, in my point of view, it's always an iterative process. It's always a process where you'll start with something, you'll test it internally and externally, and you improve as you go.
I would agree, and I think there are, when you think about it, it can become very, very, very sophisticated, and I think there are two layers of abstraction here to consider at a technical level. The first is the LLM in and of itself, with over 40,000 different LLMs in existence right now, and many, many, many more coming into or onto the landscape at any one point in time. Lots of them are iterations in and of themselves, right? So we see it in OpenAI, where it is getting better and better and better and better in terms of how it's managed and what its context is. If you take any one of those LLMs, just a standard one that's non-specific like OpenAI, it's highly intelligent to begin with, right? But what we found, and what's quite interesting about LLMs, is that if it doesn't specifically know an answer, it will still give you one, right? So there's what we call hallucination. There's a certain amount of hallucination that is provided from the LLM landscape and environment, right? And that's, it's a lot of the disclaimers that are provided with them. We get that and we understand that. That, if you took that at face value, you could have a highly capable vertical agent. Let's go back to our customer service program. That is, sounds great, but actually, 30% of the time or more is giving invalid data back as a reply to a happy customer that won't be happy for very long. Right? So in order to bridge that gap, as well as the LLM, you then have to update that LLM with data that is specific to your use cases and your edge cases, so that you can be really, really clear that the data that is being provided, that the information that is being provided, is very, very specific to your organization and the problems that you're trying to resolve for your customers in this vertical use case. So I'd say two things. One, what is the best LLM for you to start using anyway, right? So if you're doing something quite generic, maybe it is OpenAI or Llama or something similar, but there are all kinds of LLMs out there that are very, very specific. So for instance, Bloomberg have one that is specific to finance, right? There are health tech and healthcare LLMs that understand already a very high level of the terminology, the context, which is extremely important inside those industrial environments. So you will start by choosing the LLM data set before you go any further that is specific to the support or the vertical agent use case that you want to build. Then, I think, as Miro says, it's really only then that the hard work starts, because it's then that you need to take your private data, your corporate memory, and fine-tune a clone of that LLM with that data in a specific way, and then iteratively test the life out of it until you get the responses that are consistently associated with what you expect high-quality responses to be from that data at all times. Knowing that your LLM will already understand context, already understand language, already understand multiple languages, that's a baseline. Now you're actually putting in some pixie dust, which is the stuff that it doesn't know. And if you train it properly, you will have an outstanding solution that you can then iteratively make better and better and better and better. And then, of course, you've got the opportunity to continue to train it based upon the quality of questions that you're being asked by your customers. Because as their questions change, so should your training of your data in order to be more responsive and adding higher value to the end user. Again, that's just looking at the customer services use case.
Brilliant. So, I mean, it sounds there that you've got a couple of... The Bloomberg one, is that internally developed? Do you know?
Yeah, specifically developed by them.
Yeah, by them for their specific use case.
Yeah, and it's not public domain, so spookily enough, you've got to pay for it.
Well, let's steer the conversation in that direction then. So sort of like purposeful LLMs, different vertical agents for different use cases. Perhaps we could start talking about some of the use cases outside of the support sphere. I know there's been a lot of kind of traction on the finance and accounting side, the ability to pull and interpret and analyze numbers. I don't know if we want to start there or anywhere else that you've seen it in companies we've engaged with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work going on in the financial services space, definitely for things like fraud prevention, right? When we deal with large data sets, when we deal with lots of personal data, being able to analyze a large amount of data in a very responsive fashion, because for things like fraud, you want to be able to stop it as soon as you can, right? So being able to pick the outliers, do anomaly detection in large data sets, that's something that is a place where a lot of investment currently is going in the AI and financial services sector, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd also look at legal. Legal is a very data intensive, but it's also a very context and nuance intensive industry. And I think that there is an overlap here between vertical agents and AI services. Now, I'll maybe explain that a bit further. So I can see this level of abstraction being very, very lucrative, but also very, very interesting. Lawyers are quite worried about low-level work being taken away from them. But actually, I see that the level of skill and knowledge that they have still being very, very valuable, but being provided at a higher level. So let me give you an example. So you may go to a website, a legal website, and instead of calling a lawyer, you may have a conversation or consult with an AI lawyer, so that they can start to understand the context of what you're looking for, right? And let's say building a contract between company A and company B, they may be able to provide that for you and provide all the missing links and all the missing data and update it in such a way that's best practice really, really easily, right? And you might pay for that as a one-off individual service that's provided from end to end by that vertical AI assistant. But if you fast forward 12 months or 18 months, where you actually now have a legal issue between company A and company B for a breach of that contract, and you go back to your AI lawyer, right? They will understand the context of that contract that they built for you, but they might actually, after asking you a few questions, put you in contact with a real lawyer to start having a conversation about what your options and what your remedy might be. I'm not saying that AI isn't going to get to that point at some point in time in the future. Maybe it will. I'm sure it will. But for now, there is a point where you will have more breadth and more capability to deal with the experience of a very capable contract lawyer who now understands the exact basis of what's been done, because all that information has been harvested for them to begin with, and then they step in and manage bits and pieces of it from there. And to take it to its conclusion, there may well be letters that are written, there may well be data that is transferred, all of which can be picked up to support them by AI systems for them. But the clear, unambiguous skill that they have as qualified lawyers are the decision points that decide and give support for their customer about what happens next in this process, because it's a very nuanced thing. So I see that level of abstraction being a really, really valuable thing. And I think for organizations, they need to start thinking now about strategically where abstraction could take place, where it should take place, and where they can remove as much cost as possible from that, even potentially giving that away for free to get into the opportunity to provide the more valuable services, most of which will still be provided by humans for the short to medium term at least.
And there's an interesting point there around, for example, let's imagine that you've got an AI agent writing letters to your customers, right? As a lawyer, I think there's a point around governance and personal governance of you, on your AI agent, right? AI can't be responsible or accountable for things on behalf of you or your firm unless you empower it to be, right? Yeah. So effectively, it's the same as Tesla, full self-driving, all the things, somebody is still responsible for the vehicle, right? And exactly here as well, right? You can't tell your client that, oh, right, yeah, there was an issue in the contract. It was written by AI. Sorry about that. Not my fault, right? Because it is your fault. Right? Yeah. So how do you apply the level of quality control, right, and legal oversight into stuff that is generated by AI? I think that's an interesting challenge.
It is, but there's bandwidth to do it right now, right? So because they're doing it at the moment. So what we're really saying is that the AI is not a qualified lawyer. It is not possible for it to be a qualified lawyer at this point in time. Maybe it will in the future, but while it is not, it is the responsibility of the organization to be aware of every piece of documentation that goes out of their organization that's technically authored and authorized by them. They currently do that. So now, without having the onus of having to write it, all they really have to do is verify it, understanding the context of it. And all these systems can be put in place to highlight both the request for authority and the priority and the importance of these items. So literally all they have to do is check that it's right and let it go. Unfortunately, the human condition is one where apathy comes in quite quickly, and humans love to go the shortest route from A to B. All right. So there will definitely be a point where, and I'm choosing the legal fraternity because it makes me laugh, but where they will be sued because they didn't put enough control in place to stop the AI from just doing what they thought it was going to do, instead of controlling and authorizing it properly, and they'll be hauled over the coals for that. But these are small rookie errors from rogue environments that will get tested and replaced over a period of time. And indeed, if I was receiving advice from an AI, I would want to know, not think, know that it had been signed off by a qualified lawyer, and have that unquestionable proof before I acted upon it, because that's what people are likely and planning to do.
I think if I was doing business with an AI lawyer, I would definitely not want to be paying the full rate either.
That's relative though, isn't it? Because it depends what you're paying for, because in lots of these cases, tax is a very good example, which is ripe for this. You pay a good tax lawyer a lot of money, but they're saving you 10 times as much money in tax. It's a no-brainer. Why do you care whether it's an algorithm or it's human, so long as you get the right advice that's going to pass through the taxman's loop without any issue in the shortest possible period of time? And for me, cost is relative to the outcome, right? And if the outcome is valuable to you, then actually I think it will start to cloud over a little bit where that advice is coming from. But a lot of that is then still based by what's underneath this, what's backing this up, where did this come from, right? And can I take the tax example, show all of these calculations to the taxman and not think twice about where it's come from, and know that it's a valid part for my tax return. It's going to save me, 90% on what would have been a high tax bill, right? So in most cases, I think you're probably right. But where there is a relative dependency on the outcome, I think people genuinely won't care.
I suppose you could chalk it up as an R&D cost, right? You trained it, you infused your expertise into it, so that was the cost. That's what you're paying for.
It's exactly more importantly, you already have the intellectual property for the corporate memory to begin with, right? But it's not quantified or qualified anywhere, and certainly not captured on your balance sheet. So interestingly enough, when you tune a large language model over what is many man years, maybe, to be able to get to where you need it to be, you're actually creating real intellectual property that is an artifact that is identifiable. That can sit on your balance sheet, right? For the amount of time that you spent on it, the amount of cost that it creates, and you can amortize that over time. So it comes out of your P&L. It's not an operational cost. It's something that goes below the line on EBITDA. It's a very lucrative way for you to show your investment, real investment in AI, and see its tangible value on your balance sheet over time.
And what about kind of other areas of the business? I know we're seeing a bit more about sort of at least automating the human resource function in a lot of companies. Outside of, we've talked about finance, we've talked about legal. What about HR?
Wow. I mean, I think the whole HR thing, I think this is going to be a complete tipping point for HR. We've been through quite a number of rebirths for HR over the last 10 years, right? Really, if you go back the last 20 years, as soon as the internet became available, it changed everything for recruitment in particular. And I'll start with recruitment, because you could spend the whole day talking about HR in general, right? But if you look at recruitment from both sides of the fence, organizations looking to hire certain people and people looking to get hired. When you started with websites like monster.com, it just changed the game, right? changed the game, give everybody generalistic access to it. And it changed the whole boutique recruitment function for the mid-tier, right? You still have people right at the top. To a certain extent, that mid-tier thing's changed about 46 times. And now one area you've got LinkedIn, which has changed an awful lot of it. And you've also got Indeed.com, which has, again, changed a huge amount of it, mainly because it's dropped the price to virtually a non-material price. However, you still now have the volume issue. When the price is low, you have 47,000 people replying to an individual recruitment item. And now, how do you deal with the volume, right? Well, AI is amazing at dealing with volume. However, you now on the other side of the fence have AI building your CV for you, so it's going to make sure that you punch above your weight. So it's now there's a constant battle going on. How do I filter these out? And on the other side, saying how do I make sure I don't get filtered out? And these two things will be beating each other technically and virtually with a stick for a long period of time. I think there's room for the whole thing to change, right? I really do. And I think when you can see, and also I think there's a change in mentality in the Gen Z millennial mentality around loyalty to work now, because there generally isn't loyalty to roles for periods of time. But they have very defined criteria about why they would move, right? Which is different from what came before. So with all of this variability in terms of hybrid working, value for money, salaries, promotion capabilities, types of businesses. Now, not everybody will work everywhere. When you start to build up your profile now for that, and let's say you have it in one place, it could be LinkedIn. I prefer it not to be, but let's assume it's LinkedIn. Then there are ways I think that AI will start to reverse troll and look for, instead of advertising anything, it will start to find the best candidates from the pool, whether they're employed or not, all right? Because this all comes from corporations' requirements to resource rather than people's outlook for a job. Because if there are no jobs, it doesn't matter whether you want one or not, right? You're not going to get one. But if there are organizations that have roles that need to be recruited, then I think there are really, really intelligent new platform ways for AI to start trolling and crawling and finding the right people for those roles, and then creating those shortlists. So you're not actually advertising in the first place, so you're not dealing with the volume either, right? So then I genuinely think that the optimization and summarization are two of the many strongest points for AI utilization. And I can easily see a new paradigm for recruitment coming out of this. And it would start to make life an awful lot easier. And that's before you go anywhere near using AI agents to run interviews and do all the other stuff. A lot of which is already occurring, right?
And there's a thing there in recruitment. You know, what do you actually test for, right? Mm-hmm. What do you actually look for in a candidate? You know, we have all the knowledge of the world at our fingertips, right? We've now got the capability of generating code with large language models, right? Mm-hmm. We've got the capabilities of kind of getting a very structured and usable answer to any of our questions. Just ask the agent, right? So what do you actually look for in a candidate now? Are you looking for knowledge? The knowledge is already there, regardless of the candidate, right? You're looking for ability to apply that knowledge, right? You're looking for certain behavioral traits rather than what they know, right? So I think there's going to be a change on a larger scale in that as well, right? And then what you said about AI interviews and AI agents hiring people, that's going to get interesting then, right? Can you use an AI agent to screen people for kindness?
Well, I was actually thinking about maybe even going even further, because the whole personal assistant piece is about to go through the roof, right? So and what a CV doesn't show at the moment which is even difficult for some people to display through interviews, is the wealth of your experiences. All right. So if my AI assistant had access to everything I've ever read, everything I've ever written, and it has it is as close to a digital replicant of me, all right, then the AI interviewee could interview the AI replicant and assistant, which means it could be volumized significantly if that's what they wanted to do. And I think over time, we've seen this already, Miro, that fine-tuned LLMs do take on the personas of the individuals that provide that data to them, if that data is specific to those people. So it will be not beyond the scope at all for an AI assistant to have the personality traits of the person that they're replicating. So again, this can go on and on and on and on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And at some point, we can just skip the conversation altogether and just exchange data blobs, JSON objects, right?
Yeah. That's how it will end up being.
Truly very human resources at that point, right?
No.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. I think we're going to leave it there then. Thank you for that bleak look into our dystopian future and the insights into the AI vertical agents. We'll probably do one more of these because I feel like there's always a yang to the yin. We've been talking a lot about the advantages. I feel like we need to talk a little bit about the disadvantages potentially on the next episode. But for now, I'll say thank you very much, gentlemen, for your insights as always.
Thank you very much.
And if you'd like to register for the podcast, you can find us at release.works/podcast. We are on Spotify, YouTube, RSS, StreamYard. Thanks very much.
Cheers.